आपका धर्म, आपका स्टेशन, टीवी जागृति।
I don't know what to do, Mom. He's my children's father, and I really love him, but he only reacts like this when he drinks.
Ma'am, I will ensure that you get all the help that you need.
The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is devoted to providing assistance to victims of domestic violence. If you're a victim of domestic violence, a report should be made to the police immediately so the matter can be addressed in the most appropriate manner. Domestic violence is very serious. Do not wait until it's too late.
After huge success in Mokoya, La Romine and South Park Mall, for the first time ever, Indian Style Expo will be at the air-conditioned Dome at Mid-Center Mall from January 6th. Over 60 merchants. Get all that you need. Garments, furniture, handicraft, footwear, jewelry and so much more. For the first time ever in Trinidad, be sure to check out our $20 food court. Yes, you heard right, but that's not all. When you spend over $200, you also get a free meal. Bring your kids to the arcade while you shop. The Indian Style Expo at the air-conditioned Dome, Mid-Center Mall, starting on January 6th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, including weekends and holidays.
आपका धर्म, आपका स्टेशन, टीवी जागृति।
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to Section 1. It's me, Kiel Tacklalsingh. Unfortunately, my co-host, Mr. Stefan Ramkisoon, the very bright and young Mr. Ramkisoon, was unable to assist me this afternoon or to co-host. He has some personal issues. So I will be dealing with several things I think that are in the public interest. One of the big things that has come into the public domain, shot into the public domain, is that of the Commission of Inquiry into Paria. That report has become public. Several recommendations have been made. Several things have been said in relation to that Commission of Inquiry. I think it's important that we look into that. Now, there's no way that we could really delve into that report. I think it's a 300-page report or something like that into one episode. So what I want to do today is to at least try to cover a summary of that report, look at some of the things that have some of the findings, some of the recommendations, if we can get into it. Maybe we just look at the summary today and we delve deeper into the findings and evidence. I think that report is going to be a very important part of history in Trinidad and Tobago. It is probably the worst industrial, or one of the worst industrial accidents or incidents that have happened in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's certainly something that society, policymakers, politicians, functionaries ought to be looking at and examining very carefully and determining, what are the steps that we as a society, we as legislators, we as policymakers can implement to ensure that a tragedy of that nature, never happens again, or we minimize the risk, because ultimately it's about minimizing risk, that we minimize the risk. And even if something like incident like that does happen, well, what is the response? How do we deal with it? How do we try to mitigate the damages? And then worst of all, even if the incident is such that you can't mitigate damages because things happen, how do we treat with it after? How do we deal with the families? How do we deal with the loved ones? How do we deal with the fallout of the incident? I think all of those are very, very important things that we need to look at in relation to that report. So when I'm back, I will probably get into some of the summary, some of the findings of that. One of the things I wanted to start today by talking about, of course, on a lighter note, is to congratulate the West Indies cricket team on a very, very brilliant performance. You know, we have, I suppose, West Indian fans have become so jaded with loss that we expect that when you come up against a side like Australia, you're going to lose. But today, the West Indies team performed exceptionally well. I just wanted to get the scores for everyone. I suppose everybody has the scores. But, you know, the team, they performed really, really well. There was an amazing spell of bowling by, I think his name is Shamma Joseph. Brilliant bowling, brilliant spell of fast bowling, aggressive, short pace, made all the batsmen uncomfortable. When he needed to pitch it up, he pitched it up, took the wickets, and it really goes to show you what talent we have in the West Indies and the strength of good performance and character that can come out of the West Indies cricket team. It was really heartening. I stayed up last night to look at it, and I have to say that I was rewarded by seeing some good cricket, good competitive cricket, because it was not a dominant performance, I would say, but it certainly was a performance that the West Indies, you could say that the West Indies deserved their victory. Several other things as well in the public domain before we get into the Commission of Inquiry. I want to also deal with this Vincent Nelson trial that is taking place. I think most people know that the trial has started. It's been reported in the media that the trial has begun in the High Court. Unfortunately, there is a prohibition in making a lot of it public, and let me tell you what that means. Of course, everybody understands and knows about the Vincent Nelson scandal. He's now a discredited lawyer to some extent, who is accused of taking, engaging in corrupt activities, paying kickbacks, that sort of thing. And you had criminal charges being filed against two prominent attorneys in Trinidad and Tobago based on the evidence that he has given, or he promised to give. It subsequently came out that certain promises and inducements and indemnities were offered to him. Whether or not those indemnities were offered to him to get him to give the evidence, or whether it was a genuine case that he wanted to give evidence and there were supposed to be indemnities, those are things that may have to be resolved. But what we do know is that currently there is a civil trial taking place in our courts where Mr. Nelson has made certain allegations against the state. He has made certain allegations against the Attorney General. He has former Attorney General. He has made certain allegations against very high public officials in this country. And open justice means that the citizens of this country ought to have the opportunity to scrutinize those proceedings, look at the evidence, look at what is being said, and come to your own determination. And of course, the court will come to its determination. But it's not necessarily about finding the ruling and the judgment. But it's what comes out of that trial. I think it is important that people follow the issues and follow the evidence and follow the twists and turns that trial could take. The Vincent Nelson matter was one of the worst scandals in Trinidad and Tobago ever. It is perhaps the worst scandal where you have an allegation that someone may have been induced to give evidence to prosecute political opponents. Let that sink in. You can imagine that one day your son, your daughter, you yourself decides that you want to get into politics. You decide you join a political party, and all you are doing is expressing your views. You are expressing your views virulently. You're expressing your views about political change, and those views start to rub the ruling party the wrong way. And then one day you wake up and you're charged or you're being prosecuted for something you may never have done. You had nothing to do. But because the government is able to use resources to entice or induce persons to sign statements, to give evidence, you could find yourself on the end of a charge, a criminal charge, having to go to court, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to defend your name and keep you out of jail. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, even more perhaps. Have to go through the reputational damage of being charged, have to go through all manner of psychological pain and discomfort because you have to face a prosecution in court simply because you decided that you want to enter into politics and you wanted to express your views. And that certainly was the case of the persons who were charged. I don't want to get into calling names again. I think everybody knows, right? People, virulent characters in the politics, brilliant attorneys, charged, and we don't know as a population, we don't know, and it seems that because the civil trial is now being suppressed, we would never know what was the evidence and whether or not the allegations that Mr. Nelson now makes, that he entered into agreements, that he has an indemnity agreement, and that certain things were promised to him in order to give this evidence. We won't be able to judge all of these facts together to come to our own conclusions. And I say it and I said it at the time, no Attorney General, no public official, save and except the DPP, should be treating with witnesses in a criminal prosecution, should be deciding or or encouraging them to give evidence against anybody, much less a political opponent. That is why the Constitution has a DPP, a Director of Public Prosecution, that is supposed to be an independent office to make prosecutorial decisions, including witnesses or decisions in relation to witnesses, whether or not we should give them immunity, whether or not they deserve immunity, whether or not we should have some deal with them in order to give evidence. That is a discretion of the DPP. No Attorney General who's a political actor should ever get involved in that. So where are we today? The criminal trial has been aborted or abandoned or collapsed. We have a civil case going on where they said Mr. Nelson is suing the state for millions of dollars because he is saying that there was a breach of an agreement. He got into an agreement to get certain things. He entered into agreement to get certain things in order to give evidence. He gave up certain things in order to give evidence. He entered that agreement apparently with the Attorney General's office. Craziness. That is something that the public should be able to view and scrutinize. And what is even worse than all of this is that apparently Mr. Nelson is the one, or his lawyers were the ones that applied for the matter to be sealed, hidden from public scrutiny. It has come out, according to Mr. Nelson, he says, well, he didn't give those instructions, and the new attorney sought to lift it, sought to allow the proceedings to become public. But the Attorney General has opposed that. So it is the Attorney General's office, one would think, should be fighting this trial in the open to exonerate their name and reputation. But it is that office that has opposed the public viewing or the public scrutiny of these proceedings. Why would someone not want proceedings involving them to be in the public domain? Especially if there is no criminal proceedings. You see, it's one thing if you have criminal proceedings pending. If you have criminal proceedings pending, then yes, you may want to be sensitive because you have members of a jury that might look on at the press and the sensational commentary and be influenced. And that is where you have the sub judice rule. You don't want issues being trashed out in the public. And you don't want people being influenced by commentary. And therefore you keep a hush, you keep a quiet, you keep a lid on the proceedings. But there's no longer any criminal proceedings, so there's no good reason why this matter in the civil courts, where Mr. Nelson is suing the state, not where the two gentlemen are being prosecuted, that has collapsed. There is no good reason why the proceedings where Mr. Nelson is now suing the state for the fruits of his agreement, for what he was promised by the Attorney General. Why should that be hidden from us? We want to know exactly what was promised to him. We want to know exactly how it was promised to him. We want to know exactly the circumstances in which they were promised to determine for ourselves whether our government and our Attorney General office was caught up in a scandal to induce witnesses, to give evidence, to cause a prosecution against political opponents in this country. That is a step in a very deep and dark abyss. The day that political prosecutions come upon us, the day that it could be so blatant and brazen that prosecutions could be used to deter politicians from coming forward to oppose the government. That is a very serious step. It's my respectful view that those proceedings should be made public. I saw Mr. Rambali did an excellent article about it. I would encourage anybody to read it. Maybe I have it here, maybe I don't. I would encourage everybody to read that article. He makes some really good points as to why these things, as to why it should be made public. And we should all have a read of that. So that is that issue. I think what we'll do, Bimal, let us take a short break before I get into the Commission of Inquiry, and perhaps trailing on from the cricket, where you had the young fast bowler doing so well. There's a video that I saw circulating, and I feel like I have to comment on it. I thought about it. I didn't want to comment on it. I said, let it pass. Enough time passed. But you know what? It bothers me a little bit today. And it really bothers me because I think that the young people in this country are often abused for no good reason. They're often abused for no good reason, and I really took offense to some of the commentary that I heard in this video on a UNC, well, on a UNC-sponsored Crime Talks platform, or whatever it was. And I'm going to deal with it because, you see, I'm not beholden to anybody. I have my opinions and I will stick with them. And this is in no way any insult to any party, anybody, any politician. I had a problem. I have a problem with what the speaker said, and I prefer not to leave it unchecked. So, Bimal will run that video. Let's take a break and come back and we'll run that video.
Sitaram to you all listeners on Radio Jagrati, 100.7 FM, or viewers on TV Jagrati. You are invited to join us for the program Pravachan on radio and TV Jagrati from 7 to 9 p.m. Joining us will be Pandits of the Sanathan Dharma Mahasabha's Pandits Parishad. Pravachan on radio and TV Jagrati from 7 to 9 p.m.
Hey, Dilip Dinesh Maharaj here, wondering what your weekends are like. Are you with friends and family, on the roads, at work? Well, wherever you are, join with me on Radio Jagrati 102.7 FM for the weekend program Salona. Salona brings to you a wonderful selection of music ranging from religious, folk, golden classics and Bollywood hits to keep your company as you enjoy your weekend and prepare for the week ahead. Join me on Radio Jagrati 102.7 FM every Saturday and Sunday from 9 p.m. and Mondays from 10 p.m. till 12 midnight for your cup of Salona, a musical experience to satiate your musical thirst and desires.
Sitaram, you are invited to join His Holiness the Dharmacharya of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Pandit Dr. Ramprasad Parasram, every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on radio and TV Jagrati for the program Understanding Dharma, helping us lift ourselves from the mundane to the sublime, from turmoil to peace, from bondage to salvation. Understanding Dharma with our Dharmacharya, His Holiness Pandit Dr. Ramprasad Parasram, every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on radio and TV Jagrati. Sitaram.
Right, welcome back to section 1. Bimal, if we have that video, let's play it. I don't think there's any obscenity, but so let's play it, and I will comment on it after.
They are not the students of yesterday. There is this Gen Z culture. Okay, we have Gen Z and millenniums. Gen Z are those between the ages of 12 and 27, and the millenniums are those between the ages of 28 and 43. This culture, they're perpetuating, I don't know where it's coming from, entitlement, uncaring, selfish, quick money. Some are very privileged, they're spoiled, and they're lazy. Now that is because the generation before them worked very, very hard to give them everything they want, and they're giving them everything they want. Not a good idea. They don't wish to work, they don't read, they don't watch the news, they don't even watch TV, they don't even watch a movie. They are unaware of current affairs, they do not care. All day in that phone, all day, I don't know what they be doing. I don't know if it is porn, I don't know what is the obsession. I understand they're dating on the phone as well. So I am asking the parents out there, and this is in the national community, to pay attention to what your children are doing and take control. Take control. You are the parents. You know, some of them come and they complain to me about the children. I say, but I am my child. That's your child. Take control.
And everybody in the crowd, right? Yes, yes. Gen Z and this and Gen X. You know what Gen Z and Gen X is? That ranges up to people up to 40 years. They don't read. They're entitled. Right? A certain nonsense spoken by that speaker. Complete rubbish. First of all, that is a very, very broad and general statement to suggest that everybody under the age of, let's say, 45 does not read, lazy, and entitled. Well, I'm 40. I read more than 6 hours a day sometimes, right? And I'm just talking about me. My generation, and the Gen Z generation, as she calls it, right? They are some of the most educated young people or persons or human beings on this earth. They have degrees, masters, PhDs before sometimes the age of 35. They are grappling with more information than that speaker probably ever had come at them. The age of internet, the age of, data has increased hundreds of times within a very short span of time. And the ignorant conversation about always on your phone. On a phone, a CEO can run a company. On a single device, you can access email, you can access servers, you can access information, you can access databases. There are applications, artificial intelligence, all of these things. So when you see a young person that is on a phone, don't assume they're there to do what? Take pictures and say, that's the view you have of young people, right? Yes, there is social media, but even social media has revolutionized business and technology and marketing and advertising and all these things. What an absolutely absurd and ignorant view by that speaker. And there were people clapping that. I was supposed to be at that conference. Unfortunately, I was in court very late, so I couldn't go. Thank God I wasn't there, because I would have guaranteed when I finished speak to her, she wasn't coming back. Guarantee I would have dealt with that. Legally, of course. I would have dealt with that. What an absurd proposition that every young person is entitled. Oh, and the best, they're entitled because the generation before them give them everything they have. Wow. So nobody under the age of 40 work for what they have? Nobody under the age of 40 struggled, studied hard, won scholarships. Yes, your parents help you, and yes, the generation above help and provide, and people are eternally grateful for that. But do you think people were handed, do you think young people are handed things on a silver platter? And what do you mean by take control? After the age of 18, someone is an adult, what you want to do? Put them in servitude? You want to enslave them? My dad always told me, he said that, I remember somebody, he's died now, but Somebody said, well, you know, children must be trained. You had to train your children properly. And you know what he told the person, and I always remember? He said, you don't train children, you teach them. You train animals. So all of this nonsense about take control and deal with them, and like if young people are chattel, you teach. And if the generation which you are speaking about have not learned, whose fault is that? Theirs? Because they weren't taught properly? Let's use our heads when we speak. Let us not disengage young people. And I think it was made in the context of young people are not engaged in politics and they're not engaged in political discourse. Well, it's because of your generation. Let me generalize now. It is because of the politics that your generation, the older generation, has practiced. The politics of race, the politics of division, the politics of selfishness, the politics of always wanting to be in power, no matter what. The politics of compromising principles and beliefs, and even religious beliefs, because you think that you have to do anything to be in power. Maybe that is the problem. Maybe it is the generation before us that has failed us. Why isn't the economy of Trinidad and Tobago diversified? Because of the people under 40? Why is the crime problem so bad now? And you have such bad infrastructure in this country so, as of this point in time. Is that because of the generation 40? Why don't we have the proper laws and systems in place that make Trinidad and Tobago a first world country? That's because of people under 40. So there are plenty blame to go around, ma'am, with all due respect. And I don't think it helps anybody by attacking an entire generation of persons. Really doesn't. I don't know what research I understand that the lady is a researcher and a lecturer. Maybe you should look back at some of your research and maybe conduct some new types of research and really look into what are the problems that young people face that may either deviate them towards a life of crime or deviate them away from political engagement and policy. Have a look at that, think about it, and think about it before you decide to go on a platform and speak about it. And I want to say I'm very disappointed, respectfully, in that crowd and the persons who were there for not pulling up, or for not disagreeing or not pointing out some of the obvious flaws in her discourse. It was very disheartening that I had to sit and listen to that. Right, so let's take a quick break again, and I'll come back to commission inquiry and some of the things that happened there.
Sitaram, I am Sharvani Sukhai, inviting you to be a part of my television sensation, Bollywood's Best on TNT's Best TV Jagriti. Tune in every Sunday morning from 10 to 11 as together we count down the top 10 biggest and best Bollywood videos of the week, check out the latest movie previews, and of course, what's trending with your favorite Bollywood celebrities. It's the only of its kind on national television, so don't miss it. Bollywood's Best every Sunday morning from 10 to 11, exclusive to TV Jagriti.
Prem se bole Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Sitaram, I am Pandit Sivananda Radhe Maharaj asking you, the viewers and the listeners of Radio and TV Jagriti, to join us every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. where we speak about the glories of Sri Krishna Bhagavan on our program Krishna Arpanam. Bolo Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai.
What you need to know, it's your business. As the world's economy evolves, what you need to know, it's your business. Keeping an eye on business and informing you on its happenings, it's our business. Eye on Business on radio and TV Jagriti, weekdays at 9 a.m.
Right, welcome back to section 1. Let's talk a little bit about this Paria report. Because of time, I won't delve too deeply into the report. I have some notes and highlights, but I think really I want to wait for Stefan and we get into the entirety of the report. So maybe what we could do today is to give a nice introduction, a nice run-up into what we're going to talk about here and some of the things that have come out about it. The first thing I want people to understand is what is a commission of inquiry. A commission of inquiry is not a prosecution. Nothing that could have come out of that commission of inquiry would have led to the immediate arrest or charging of anybody. So anybody who thinks or is disillusioned that, look, we spent millions of dollars, we hired attorneys, some of the best attorneys in the country, we hired a commissioner, we had all these hearings and facilities, and nothing has come out of it yet. If you are expecting out of a commissioner that immediately someone will be charged and put into handcuffs and carried down to the court and prosecutions would begin, that's not what a commission of inquiry is about. A commission of inquiry is set up under the Commission of Inquiries Act. It is to allow an investigation in the public interest to take place into an incident or a state of affairs. It's as broad as that. We had a very bad tragedy that occurred. It was unnatural. 4 men lost their lives in a very horrific way. And it was quite, in my view, the right step for a commission of inquiry to be instituted. And when I viewed the commission of inquiry, when I could, I think the conduct, both by the commissioner, the commission, and the legal team headed by Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, were par excellent. Par excellent, extremely professional, and they really dug into the issues. And several of the attorneys from the private bar who appeared were also very helpful in the matter. So that's the first thing. What has come out of the Commissioner of Inquiry is, well, first of all, let me say, they were tasked to look at the incident, to identify wrongdoing if it took place, and to come up with recommendations. That is what a Commission of Inquiry does, and a report has now emerged into the public domain, and you have several recommendations. One of the recommendations that came out was that potentially the DPP and the police should look at an investigation and or prosecution of corporate manslaughter against Paria, the company. Yes, that can be done. There is an act, a statute, the Criminal Procedure Corporations Act or something like that. I have it there, which I'll get into in detail. The law is there, the statute is there, and there is a common law position in it as well. What that means is there is a body of law which allows a company to be charged and fined. That's the first thing. The second thing is it also identified wrongdoing on the parts of certain persons who were involved in the entire debacle that took place. There is something called criminal negligence. You may not have intended to pick up an axe and kill somebody or to drown the divers, but because of the gross negligence in the way you conducted your affairs on that day, you can face criminal sanction, which could include jail time, or serious and severe fines, or both. The commission, the report has identified some wrongdoing in regard to certain individuals. We'll get into that because that is something I want to quote. I don't want to say it, right? And we'll delve into the report for that. The other thing and the other more important thing that has come out of this report and the evidence that has acquired is that there were serious shortcomings in the way that we undertake, generally speaking, industrial work in this country, but more particularly into this type of work with diving. One of the startling things that I saw in this report is that apparently nobody, LCMS, LMCS, Paria, planned for a delta P. Everybody knows what a delta P is. That is when you have a great suction and everybody is swallowed in. That is essentially what a delta P event could be when you're diving. There was no identifying of that risk prior to this job being done. So imagine something that is so common in the industry, or it is a hazard that is so well identified and documented in the industry, that nobody, when you're planning the work, when you're submitting plans back and forth, when Paria has to approve the plans to ensure that the work is done efficiently, competently, and safely, or when it is submitted, nobody identified, well, there's a possibility that a delta P could occur, and we should take steps and precautions to mitigate that or have a plan in the event that something happened. And that is exactly what happened, and 4 men lost their lives. How on earth did that slip past? How on earth did that slip past? Is really, really boggles the mind. And I think that is symptomatic of a general culture in our society where we don't pay attention to safety or a safety culture or health and safety on the whole. We have an OSH Act. It is not well enforced. The OSH authority is notoriously under-resourced. Investigations take long. I know of investigations that took so long that you couldn't prosecute under the Act because I think there's a 2-year limitation period. But the investigation took longer than that. So by the time they found guilt, nobody could be prosecuted. And if you don't have follow-up and a culture and a norm of prosecuting poor health and safety practices, then you're never going to fix the industry or industries, and you're never going to engender a culture of safety in the workplace or in industrial environments. Trinidad and Tobago is an industry-based society. We have petrochemicals, we have all different types of industry in Trinidad and Tobago. We're trying to diversify the economy. More than likely, we're going to try to get into other types of industry, agro-processing. What is going to happen to the ordinary worker who has to earn a salary, who has to take care of his family, and therefore must put himself at risk unnecessarily to go into a workplace, to go into an industrial environment, and then one day because people aren't taking care or abiding by industry norms, industry safety norms and standards, they're killed or maimed or seriously hurt. That can't be right. That is a kind of classist thing. It can't be right. It can't be right for the ordinary worker to have to suffer that type of risk because he needs to earn a living. And what this Commission of Inquiry threw up is that even when the incident occurred, there was such a lethargy. Nobody had a plan. There was one person who was apparently playing 3 roles. And the Commission found that that was way too much for one person to be dealing with, to be with the rescue diver, to be the manager, to be something else. You couldn't do all 3. And it's because, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but we'll get into it, is it because people were cutting costs? Is that it? Another thing that the report identified is there was no independent expert to look at this process and make recommendations. So you didn't have a subject matter or industry diving expert supervising what was obviously a dangerous or a high-risk piece of work. And I think the commissioners found that there was enough room in the budget to do it. So we just cut, while we're boasting about, the government is boasting about all these profits that Paria is making. I don't think that makes sense personally, but let's say they are making all these profits. You're telling me you're making all these profits and you're not risking, and you're willing to risk human life. That can't be right. What's the cost of a human life? It's irreplaceable. So the report is something that has come out that requires study. My own view on it, having read it, I think that several things have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is that the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, having been provided with this report, needs to make decisions quickly. He can't sit on this report, with all due respect. He can't wait years. He can't hire experts to review it and review it again. He needs to identify the report. He needs to work with the police. You need to gather the evidence, and you need to institute prosecutions if you think that prosecutions are deserved. You have an independent role. You can't let society pressure you into prosecuting, but as long as there is evidence identified, and I think that is where the commissioners have come down, there is serious evidence of negligence, serious evidence of missteps that took place, criminal prosecution should be instituted forthwith. Don't delay. Justice delayed is justice denied. Another thing, an observation that I noticed in this entire process is that the police were completely absent. Completely absent. Accident takes place. All of this is going on. Subsequent to this, it is clear that something went wrong. Where is the police investigation? Why didn't, days after, the police go in there under suspicion that there may have been criminal negligence, obtain warrants, and secure the documentation, the footage, the contemporaneous notes, the evidence? Where were they? And what I suspect, it is not because police officers do not know what to do, or it is not that police officers did not want to intervene. I suspect that when you're trying to prosecute criminal negligence in the context of health and safety, it requires some expertise that the police simply may not have. So the time perhaps has come for the police to have a health and safety prosecution unit. Why not? Why can't the police spend some money, train some officers in health and safety? And where industrial accidents occur, separate apart from the OSH authority, the police must go in and investigate and look at things and determine if criminal negligence arose. Because you see, it's a difference. Let's say someone sets up a scaffolding. Let's take it as a very basic thing. And the scaffolding was not secured according to, let's say, industry standard or the best practice. OSH would go in there, identify that, and perhaps commence an industrial court prosecution to say, well, you didn't comply with the rigorous standards, etc. But what if someone was just completely negligent and didn't care and set up the scaffolding anyhow, no standard at all, knowing fully well it could fall on and kill people, but they just didn't care? And that is the level of criminal negligence. Why should the person who did that escape criminal prosecution and jail time? Why must he only face fines under the OSH Act and that sort of thing? It's because the police are not trained to do it. At least I don't think so. Do we have a health and safety unit in the police to go out and investigate health and safety issues where serious workplace accidents occur and criminal negligence has to be unearthed? Do we have that? I don't think so. And maybe that is something that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service should be instituting. It has to be. We obviously have to resource the OSH department better, because this report, I think, shows up that, the inspectorate really didn't do what it had to do. It didn't get in there on time, and you may have had people escaping liability, or you may have had an improper investigation by the OSH Act. If this commission of inquiry did not take place, we may not have had the collation of all of this evidence that we have now to scrutinize. So that is something I think that needs to be dealt with. We also have to look at adjusting the laws in this country in terms of when it comes to workplace safety. The OSH Act is good, but the time has come where we need to get better. There was a recommendation, not in the report, but in a case that I read, that the corporate manslaughter law has to be adjusted. As it is now, based on legal tests, it's a little more difficult, but the time has come. If a company is seriously negligent in the way it provides a safe system of work, or a system of work for people to come, serious prosecution should take place, not only against the company, but the directors. It may have to come to that now, because we can't afford to have these types of accidents take place where people have to work and earn a living. Because where people have to work and earn a living, you don't really have a choice. You have to earn a living. And if your specialty is diving, then you have to dive to earn a living. But what you should expect as an ordinary person, an ordinary worker, is that when you go out to do these jobs, that standards of safety are observed and that you can do your job at least in an environment where risk is minimized, or minimized as much as it can be. I'm also very concerned in this report about the escaping of liability of the government in this matter. The report, to be fair to the commissioners, it did not have to go that far. That certainly wasn't the mandate. But I can't help but say that ultimately Paria is a state-owned company. The board is appointed by the executive, the government, the cabinet, when these incidents occurred, was it good enough for the government and the line minister to simply wash their hands and say, well, let Paria handle it? Especially when it came to rescue, especially when it came to aftercare, because one of the things that the report points out is the treatment that the family had to undergo subsequent to the incident taking place. I think there's some line about talking to them by a gate. Are you telling me that the entire Paria compound, you didn't have somewhere that you could have put them and taken care of them and updated them regularly and console them? That is, horrific. Horrific. It was made very clear by the chairman that this was not any mere accident or an act of God. What led to the loss of life here was negligence on different parts, and we'll get into what was LMCS's role, and we'll get into Paria's role, and we'll get into the rescue authority's role on the next occasion. And we have about 5 or 10 minutes again. We have to leave a little early today. But we'll get into all of that when I dive into this report next week. But ultimately, it is clear, the finding is, that this was not any act of God, nor was it a mere accident. Negligence took place here. And at the end of the day, we can't bring back the lives. But what about those lives that have been impacted because of this negligence? What about the survivors, the children, the families who depended on these gentlemen, these now lost souls to earn a living? What about them? And let me be very clear, I am not one who's jumping on this bandwagon about, we spend the millions of dollars behind a commission of inquiry and we can't compensate the families. You have to do both. Responsible governance means you need to ensure that this does not happen again. To ensure that this does not happen again, you need to investigate the facts and circumstances and paperwork and evidence in a very impartial and thorough way. The way you achieve that is through a commission of inquiry. If you want it done properly, you have to hire the best. One of the best lawyers, if not the best lawyer in the country, is Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj. He led the legal team for the commission of inquiry. You had an excellent commissioner that I think everybody saw how passionate he was about the matter. So you had an excellent team that investigated. That costs money, right? That's the way the market works. That's just that's just the reality of the situation. There's a saying, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? So you had to pay. You had to spend the money to get this report, which I think is worth every cent that we got. But at the same time, I agree with the sentiment. Why are the families going to be put through court and proceedings and litigation, or even having to engage lawyers? Paria could simply get an opinion, or whatever other entity could get an opinion as to liability, what is a likely figure, and offer to settle and get this done. These families should not relive this again. They should not have to give evidence about this again. They should not have to go through the harrowing experience of listening to that tape with these gentlemen in the pipe shouting and grasping for life. That is something that nobody should go through again. So please let us have good sense prevail coming out of an inquiry which has identified negligence, it has identified shortcoming and wrongdoing. Let us not do the selfish thing. Let us compensate those who have to be compensated. Well, there's no compensation for life. But let us spend money to make the lives of these persons, the survivors, a little better. Right? And let us ensure that they are taken care of, because ultimately society and the systems have failed them. Right? Bima, let's take a quick break and we'll come back.
What you need to know, it's your business. As the world's economy evolves, what you need to know, it's your business. Keeping an eye on business and informing you on its happenings, it's our business. Eye on Business on radio and TV Jagriti, weekdays at 9 a.m.
My dear devotees, Sitaram, the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago guarantees equality of treatment of all our citizens. This has not always been adhered to. We have often gone to court for these rights. Now we have radio and television to speak out and Mukdar to strike out.
Tune in every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. drive time. The Mahasabha will strike back. Sitaram.
I am Ram Naresh Dwarika, inviting you to the program Addiction and Recovery, where we discuss issues relating to alcoholism and drug addiction. Be you an active user or in recovery, tune in every Thursday at 9 a.m. This is an interactive program and you can call 663-1027 or 663-2335, where we can interact. Join me, Ram Naresh Dwarika, for the program Addiction and Recovery every Thursday at 9 a.m.
Sitaram, you are invited to join His Holiness the Dharmacharya of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Pandit Dr. Ramprasad Parisram, every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on radio and TV Jagriti for the program Understanding Dharma, helping us lift ourselves from the mundane to the sublime, from turmoil to peace, from bondage to salvation. Understanding Dharma with our Dharmacharya, His Holiness Pandit Dr. Ramprasad Parisram, every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on radio and TV Jagriti. Sitaram.
Right, so having sort of taken a long run up, getting into some of the broader features of a commission of inquiry. What is a commission of inquiry? What was expected? No immediate prosecution could have been expected. What were the rules? Why we needed a commission of inquiry? And some of the things I think that could be used to improve, such as, having a police department really equipped to investigate these types of criminal negligence that could take place. Let's get a little bit into the report. And I think it's important to leave you today with some of what occurred on that day, that fateful day, on the 25th of February. So at paragraph 6 of the report, and let me just read quickly so we have an outline as to what is happening. And then next week when we come, what we'll probably try to do, Bimam, is put up the report so that everyone can follow. But I think looking at the way the incident occurred and some of the initial comments gives us a nice flavor. So let's get into it. This report addresses the evidence of what occurred on the 25th of February and also of the incident itself. And this is how the chronology took place. The mechanical plug, remember that when the part of this thing is the removal of a plug over the pipe which caused this suction that took the divers in. The mechanical plug was removed shortly before lunch. This was done by Budram. The entire process from the time of the removal of the plug to when the delta P was triggered took approximately 1.5 to 2 hours according to Budram. Budram, Henry, Kerb and Nagasa were in the chamber as the inflatable plug was being removed after lunch. Ali Jr. brought a spanner to assist in the release. Moments later, the sea level began to rise, according to Budram. Within a second, it felt like a tornado and all the men were pulled into the pipe. On the monitor, Farah, who was monitoring, saw a splash on the screen and it went blank. The report sets out the evidence of Budram and concludes as follows. While it is true that no one knew for sure that the men were sucked into the pipe, it was a real possibility, as neither they nor any equipment was found anywhere around the seabed. So essentially, it was more than obvious, from what I am reading here, that these men were sucked into the pipe. So there could not be any confusion about doing search and rescue all over the ocean and the seabed, because you couldn't find any equipment there. And given what we were there for, it would have been obvious. This is what this report is telling me. There was no one waiting in the habitat at all to monitor that. Let me read it again. That there was no one at all. That there was no one at all waiting in the habitat to monitor the pipe is lamentable. There it is. So imagine you have a habitat where the divers are or were, and that could monitor what the divers are doing, and there was no one there to monitor what was taking place. As a bare minimum, fresh communication, a camera and lights should have positioned in the chamber. Had that been done, we would have been immediately able to determine what happened to these divers, and a plan could be hatched. It was effectively abandoned. See, Budram may not have been in the best state of mind when he emerged, but no one at that time asked him anything about the men, the conditions of the pipe, or anything pertaining to the event. Could you imagine that you have a survivor, one out of the divers, that was sucked in? He survives. He's taken out. And the evidence and the report suggests that while he may not have been in the best state of mind when he emerged, no one at the time asked him anything about the men, the conditions of the pipe, or anything pertaining to the event. There is no reason to doubt the veracity of what Budram told the inquiry. So the commissioners accepted that. On the report on the role played by Farah and Ali Jr., the following are the conclusions. There is no way Farah, as supervisor, should have undertaken the additional role of a standby diver. Why was one person playing a role as a standby diver and supervisor? Two different things. And obviously you needed a standby diver in the event someone got into trouble. Why was that? Where was the planning? The commissioners have not identified any qualification that he holds in order to be a dive supervisor. The commissioners would have expected to have at least seen some training in that regard and an understanding of his responsibilities, but that was not demonstrated. It was improper to appoint Farah as dive supervisor at the time. He was not trained. He was not a trained dive supervisor. Diving is a very specific thing. It is a very, very specialized thing. I certainly can't even dive 10 feet underwater properly, right? Much more to think about diving with all of this equipment in this condition, to do work, to do specific tasks. To dive is hard enough. When you have to supervise that, one would think that you're better than the diver. You're more knowledgeable than that diver who actually has to do it, because you could now foresee all of the risks that he has to undertake. So for the dive supervisor not to be sufficiently qualified, as the commission has found, supervising this is horrible. And for Paria to have allowed this, to accept this plan, because you are the company, you ultimately have to provide the safe system of work. Yes, the provider can't say that I'm going to do work and I'm trained and you're not trained in safety. So the axe falls on both heads. As Shakespeare said, a plague on both your houses. Because ultimately we've lost the lives of citizens of this country in a horrific way. A plague on both of your houses. Right? Let's go back into it, Bimal. It is questionable whether having 4 divers in that habitat at any one time, given the limited space to work and the need to swap the drivers for rest periods, was a proper or wise use of the personnel to carry out the work. 4 of them did not need to be there at the same time, according to the evidence and according to this, the facts here. And that necessarily, if you have 4 people in a place where there's high risk, you're increasing the risk. So why did they have to be there? And again, that falls into supervision and proper planning of the way we undertake industrial work. It can't be right. Unless especially justified, there should have been 4 men in, there should not have been 4 men in that habitat at any one time. But we do not conclude it is wrong in principle. Kazim Ali's junior role on that day was operations manager, diver, attendant, and standby diver. Once again, these are not roles that can properly be combined. The proper application of any recognized dive standards would not have permitted any one person to hold all 3 roles. Now, again, this is not me beating up on anybody. This is not, there will be obviously individual issues and responsibility, but this is a cultural problem. And the cultural problem is we in Trinidad and Tobago, we in the workplace, we as a people have been too lax with health and safety standards. While the world was implementing health and safety legislation and authorities and clamping down on poor working conditions, we seem to be considering, profit margin, cutting corners. And it is only now that our country has become sensitized to this. And hopefully with this incident and what has taken place, and this report, because you see, I've just started this report, and you already see some of the findings and the conclusions and evidence that have pinpointed serious problems. And it could be easily transposed when one looks at it to other work environments. It talks about here, for instance, 4 men not being needed in a high-risk zone. If you're not needed in a high-risk zone, that doesn't only apply to diving. If there's some, let's say, serious other, let's say, blasting in construction, if you don't need all your personnel there to minimize risk, then you only keep the core essential people there. You understand the logic, how it transposes, and why a report like this is of such value? This could be taken if studied properly by every industry expert and transposed for your particular industry and your particular work site. That's what has to happen, and what I'm doing here, and I'm going to take the time to do it, unless Jagrati tells me I'm overdoing it. I'm going to take the time to do it, to go through this report, line by line if I have to, at least the executive summary, and point out some of the very useful things that have come out of this report. And when we get into the law and the findings and the way the facts were put and some of the liability that has to come out, then it will all come together for the population. So I think that was enough of a teaser. This is the exercise that we want to do on the next occasion. I'm going to dissect this report for the benefit of society. I'm going to try to dissect this report for the benefit of you who may not have read it. I'm going to try to summarize it this week a little more so that we can have a good understanding of what occurred on that day, why it should never happen again, and what we as a society, policymakers, legislators, voters, can do to ensure that this never happens again. See you next week.